and we'll get started. So I'm Cassie Neiman. I am a starting strength coach, but I am also a You Can Row 2 master rowing instructor with Concept 2. So Concept 2 certifies rowing instructors in the same way that starting strength does. We have a seminar. I travel around. I give the seminar. The difference is I'm the only one there coaching. It's about 8 hours of rowing. And at the end of that seminar, the person can submit a video of themselves coaching, going through a bunch of different things to show that they know how to row, they know how to coach, they know how to talk about the material, and they also have to do an exam. And once they do that, they can become certified and be on the Concept 2 website. So if you went to Concept 2 and you looked up certified rowing instructors, you would find a list of people in your state, and I'm the one that certifies them. There are other master rowing instructors that do the same. We kind of split up the country, I guess. But I feel as if it's a very similar process. It's certainly not as hard as becoming a starting strength coach, but it is at least more than just an exam. So I have been rowing for 20 years, at least. I started rowing in college. Then I coached the freshman team at Georgia Tech for 5 years. I rowed in Atlanta for many years. Now I'm in Richmond, Virginia, and I row with the Virginia Boat Club in a master's program. And I started with You Can Row 2, doing some group exercise on the rowing machines back in like 2011 when I was working at boot camp, and then I became a starting strength coach. So now I do mostly barbell strength training, and I do a lot of rowing coaching in addition to that. So that's kind of my background. So you know that I've been doing this a while. The one thing that brought me to rowing brought me to starting strength, and the thing that I really enjoyed about it is that it is actually super similar. Like the way our bodies move mechanically, it's the same because it's what's effective. So the thing that I want to bring to you today is that what you do here is not all that different than what you do under a bar. And if you look at it in the same way and you put in the same amount of work, probably not nearly as much because the weight is never going to get as heavy as you will lift on a bar, but you will get much more out of rowing. And I know you're already rowing because I know you're doing it for your conditioning. So let's get into this, okay? Let me see if I got anything. So yeah, this is a Concept 2. It is a Model D. I've got a PM5 monitor. It's, in my opinion, the best machine. A water rower is a great machine. If you have that, then great, use it. I just think this one is a little bit more stable and sturdy. It'll last you forever. It's effective. It's measurable, programmable, all the things, okay? So whether you can see this or not, it's got my Instagram, but I know Pete will tag it in there. What I want to do is talk about why rowing, okay? So if you're going to do some sort of conditioning, why would rowing be a good option? Number 2, I'm going to give you 5 tips to have a better rowing stroke. 3 of those tips don't even involve any rowing, okay? It's just literally the setup. And if you did this, your rowing stroke will probably be better. And number 3, we're going to talk just a little bit about programming and where to start. So if you're like, I've been rowing, but I feel like my rowing stroke sucks, I'll tell you some ways to kind of reel that in and where to start. I probably won't get to all your questions and stuff, but I will go back through and answer them once this is all over. And then at the end, I'll see if I can go through there. But I kind of want to go through this information and give it to you. And honestly, if there's a lot of questions and a lot of people that are interested in this topic, then hell yeah, I'll bring you more content, okay? We've just never done this before, so. All right, why rowing, all right? You are already probably, if you're on this page, you're probably doing a strength training program, maybe following the novice linear progression, maybe you're more of an intermediate or advanced, and maybe at some point you added in some conditioning. And we've talked about it as starting strength coaches. Rick talks about this, the different things you can use, those tools to create the most powerful effect with the least amount of things, right? That's what we're all about. And the great thing about the rowing machine is it's low impact. It's also not a lot of eccentric movement. It's mostly concentric. Not as totally concentric as pushing a prowler, but rowing is not going to make you super sore, which is going to allow you to lift the next day, right? Which is why we like it. It also provides this great cardiovascular response. So if you're going to pick between rowing and running, right? Rowing is going to have less impact on your joints. And if you're moving a bunch of weight, maybe you're carrying a bunch of weight, you don't want to run around, right? Maybe that's going to make you sore, or that might not make you that sore. But alternatively, if you did like a HIIT exercise with 100 lunges, that's going to make you sore. So rowing in itself is a great activity for anyone. It's super scalable. So I'm going to get into this about how it's a variable resistance machine, but it is scalable in so many ways that I can have someone who is really detrained sit on the machine and get something out of it, and somebody who is very, very strong sit on it and get something out of it. It works in both ways. And I promise I will get back to all these questions. So keep them coming because it makes me excited. People care about rowing. But the other things about rowing that as a starting strength coach, and you who are watching, probably someone who appreciates the things that we talk about, it's bilateral, right? We're using both sides of our body at the same time. It's going to use a lot of muscle mass at one time, which is another thing we like. And it uses the greatest but most effective range of motion. We can go further, but we don't need to be effective. So those are kind of the other reasons why we really like rowing. But I think the biggest things are it's low impact, doesn't have a whole lot of eccentric movement to make you sore, and it's super scalable. Skipping down to the bottom, programming wise, it also, you can do everything on it. You can do high intensity, you can do low intensity, you can do the short burst, you can do a long steady state. There's just a range, and you only need this one thing, all right? So that's why I really like rowing. Let's just make sure, cool, all right. So 5 steps to better rowing, okay? Let's start with the most complicated one, and the first thing that I want you to do when you sit on a machine. So when you sit on this machine, whether you're at the Y, whether you're in your house, whether you're at your gym, whatever it is, you need to make it your machine. Just like you set up the squat rack to match your height, you need to set up this machine to match you, okay? Step 1 is gonna be to look at the damper, all right? This is the damper, this level here on the side. A lot of times, people will sit down and not look at it. All right, this is your biggest mistake. We are all home right now, and I'm gonna, put it in these terms just because of the situation we're in. We wanna make sure that we're putting this in the right place so we don't get hurt. Because right now, there is nowhere to go if you get hurt, okay? So stay home and don't get hurt. So let's pay attention to where this damper is. Now let me explain it. Like I said, this is a variable resistance machine. That means that it can change how much resistance it's giving you based on how much work you put in. It's not like loading a bar with weight, because that weight is always going to be the same no matter how much work you put into it, okay? That's where the difference is. So when you throw this thing up to a 10, that doesn't mean that you are going to get the hardest workout. And when you throw it down to a 1, that doesn't mean that it's going to be light and easy, okay? You need to understand that first and foremost. The way it works, this machine is pulling in air, all right? It's very similar to an assault bike, an Airdyne bike, where it's pulling in a bunch of air. And when it's up at a 10, all these slots open up. You probably can't see it, but if you have your own, do it. You're gonna see all the slots open up, which means it's pulling in more air, which means that flywheel inside is gonna slow down faster. So you have to do more work to push it, and then it's gonna slow down even faster, even though you just did more work. Alternatively, putting it at a 1 is gonna close up all these slots, which means it's going to pull in less air, which means that flywheel can kind of keep moving faster, but it's going to feel lighter. Most people like to throw it up at a 10 because it feels like you're doing something, right? I get it. It makes you feel like you're doing something, and you can kind of get away with a lot of stuff without doing it right. But I would challenge you to try and bring that damper down, because what you're going to find is the way that this machine works the best mechanically is by finding the way that you're rowing, right? The speed in which you're rowing, how much force you're applying, and how much air it's pulling in so that flywheel moves continuously, The last thing we want is for that flywheel to spin and stop, spin and stop, spin and stop. And that's what happens when you throw it up at a 10 because it feels heavy. So you're doing a lot of work. So you drive real hard and then you stop. And then you come back up and then you drive real hard and you stop. And so what happens is you end up doing more work and going less distance, right? Alternatively, we put it all the way down at a 1 and you think that's like the best way to do it. It's not. You actually need to be very technically good to get that connection and that kind of catch at the front end to actually put some work into the machine. So my suggestion to you is to put it somewhere in the middle. Usually I suggest between a 3 and a 5. That's the safest place for everybody to start. Now, if you're, 250 pounds and deadlifting 500 pounds on the daily, then maybe, you're going to be up more in that 5 or 6 range. But most people are going to be in that 3 to 5 range. And I challenge you to try and find that spot. And I know there's a lot of talking about the damper, but people don't get it. Now, if you're doing really short bursts, which a lot of people are fond of on the rowing machine, 10 strokes, 20 seconds, whatever. Putting it up a little higher might actually give you more feedback, more of a response, kind of the high intensity interval feeling that you're going for. But if you're doing anything longer than 10 strokes, 20 seconds, you don't want it up here. You need to pull it down here. And if you're not doing other workouts besides those 20-second bursts, then 1, you're not going to end up being a very good rower. You're going to have to do something longer. And 2, you may not be getting that full rounded conditioning effect that you're looking for. So hopping down to number 3, my suggestion would be to do some high intensity, but also some low intensity as that fits into your program, okay? So that's a damper. So step 1, when you sit on the machine, look at it. Make sure it's where you want it to be. Mine, I almost always put it right at between a 4 and a 5. Pretty much doesn't matter what I'm doing. It's pretty much always there. Number 2, let me just see if there was any questions about that. Concept 2 or bust, Marie. Exactly. Okay, so number 2, your feet. Okay, first, don't row in your lifters. Okay, change your shoes. There's a reason for that. Okay, now when you put your feet in, we want to put it so that the strap is at the widest part of your foot. That's the ball of your foot. That's covering the top of your shoelaces, the bottom of your toes. Okay, this is very important because what we are doing here is we are driving with the legs to kind of initiate the stroke and put force in the machine. And we want to do that, guess where? The midfoot, right. So we want to make sure our feet are in the right place to do that. When we get that full compression, we also want perhaps there to be a little lift in the heel. I'm not saying your heels have to lift up, but we want that ability to do that, okay? So if you are wearing your lifters, that has a really rigid sole, you may not be able to get that kind of bend in the foot, in the sole of your foot. And it's also creating an additional angle to this foot stretcher. So mechanically, you're kind of messing everything up. So just don't wear your lifters when you're rowing, okay? It's not helpful. Any shoe is fine. So adjust these pieces so that the strap is over the widest part of your foot, okay? So that's step 2. It's easy, right? Honestly, if you just look at the damper and adjust your feet, you're already halfway there. Okay, number 3. This is my personal favorite. I want you to adjust your butt. I'm got my little hashtag, literally pick your butt cheeks up, okay? So what you're gonna do is you're gonna straighten out your legs and you're gonna reach over and touch your toes. You're gonna get a nice little stretch in the hamstrings, okay? This is just kind of like, hey, I just sat down on the machine, I'm about to do my conditioning. Now what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your hand and you're gonna literally pick your butt cheeks up and you're gonna pull them back, all right? What we're doing is we're tilting the pelvis into a more neutral position. I'm sure you've all probably worked with this on your squats or seen it in other people where there's a little bit of slipping of the butt at the bottom and a little bit of loosening of those erectors and at the bottom of that squat, and that puts us in a more vulnerable position, not as strong. Same thing here. If I'm sitting back all the way up on my butt and I hinge forward, now it's coming from my low back. We want to hinge from the hips. So we're trying to neutralize that pelvis. So pick your butt cheeks up. And you're still sitting in the middle of the seat. Now reach over and touch your toes. You're going to get a much better stretch in your hamstrings, and you're going to be able to hinge forward further, which is very important in our stroke. okay? So literally pick your butt cheeks up. All right, that's step 3. Once we have done that, now we actually need to start rowing. But if you do those things, you are going to be a better rower, okay? A lot of people talk about mobility. Most of the time, it's just where your butt is situated on the seat. So if you're having a lot of trouble getting around your knees here, right, or you got a big belly here, then adjust your butt and you're gonna be in a better position, okay? So what we're gonna do is pick up our handle. I've got it in the hook here. When you hold the handle, you're gonna hold it so that your fingers are at the edge there. So yeah, Tim, putting that damper at an 8 out of habit, maybe challenge yourself to put it at a 6 first and then a 5 and see if you can still hit those same numbers. Okay, so when you grab that handle, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the stroke from the catch position, which is this position in the front here. This is where all the work is done. Now, if any of you have gone to a starting strength seminar or learned how to squat from a starting strength coach, where do you learn the squat from the start? At the bottom, okay? We're going to do the same thing here with the rowing stroke. So when you're at the top of this stroke, right, at the catch position, what we're looking for are relaxed shoulders, straight arms, straight wrist. You're going to be engaged here in the back so that we're not rounding forward. So we're squeezing the chest up just a little bit. We're trying to get to a place where the shins are vertical, okay? It's a little hard to get when you're not moving, but that's where we want to be. And the hips are going to be behind the shoulders, okay? Guess what the first thing is it's going to be when you drive back? It's going to be a hip drive. Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing, right? Because we want to use those big muscle groups to put the force in first. We want to drive with the legs. And because we have this super long chain into the handle, we need to make sure that everything here is engaged and nothing gets lost. All right, so sitting up at the catch, the first thing you're going to do is drive the legs down. Okay, a lot of people want to do this. And I know probably when you learned the squat the first time, you lifted your chest up. But that's not what we want to do, right? Because we want to use this. Okay, so same thing with the stroke. You're going to drive with the legs. The second part of the stroke, once those legs are almost all the way down, is a hip hinge. That's that swing back. And that's going to transfer the force from the legs through the hip flexors into the upper body, okay? Once we've swung back, the only thing left to do is just pull in the arms nice and light. Okay, so it's not a big movement here with the upper body and the arms. The legs are going to do 60% of the work. Okay, so back up to the front, we'll go through that again. It's just going to be legs, body, arms. Okay, very much like a squat, folks. It's not any different. If I turn this thing up on his head, you'd be like, duh. All right, so that's why I love teaching rowing to lifters. Okay, so legs, body, arms. Now to come back to the catch, just like when we are descending into our squat, we also need to go in a specific order of operations. Otherwise, we just end up flinging ourselves back up here, and it's gonna make it really hard for us to come back out, right? We've talked about that stretch reflex at the bottom of a squat. Same thing with the rowing stroke. So the first thing that's gonna happen out of the finish, which is this position, you're laying back at about 11 o'clock, right? So all you're gonna do is release the hands. Then the body's gonna swing back over. That's where it's important to make sure your butt's in the right place so you hinge at the hips and not the low back. And then once my hands are past my knees, then I bend the knees up to the catch. When I'm back at the catch, then I can drive the legs, body, arms. So your mantra can be arms, body, legs, legs, body, arms. So the way it looks is like this, right? Arms, body, legs, legs, body, arms. Arms, body, legs, legs, body, arms. Now to feel that kind of resistance, that connection up at the front that you love to feel at a 10, but to try and feel it at a 4 or 5, you want to make sure that you are not dropping your chest up here, that you are not switching the butt in front of the hips, okay, and all of a sudden trying to pull with your upper body, okay, and that you are slowly approaching that catch. So the recovery is always slower than the drive. The other thing when you're in this position is thinking about engaging here, right? In where all that muscle mass kind of congregates, right? And engaging in your erectors, making sure that you are not pulling back here and that your butt isn't just going without everything else. So squeezing everything tight and driving back with the legs as you push through the feet, and then everything travels up through your body into the handle. Okay? Legs, body, arms. Good. Sean's got it. Okay. So what was that? Tip number 4, right? Okay. Number 5. And I'm actually going to bring you guys over here to look at this monitor with me. Because number 5 is data. We like our numbers at Starting Strength, right? We always kind of say, like, we can't base it on our feelings. And the same thing applies with the rowing machine. If you sit down and you are always going like 100 million% every time, then you are just going to work yourself up into a tizzy and just get tired. And what I'm trying to do, whether it's on the rowing machine or under a bar or doing lunges or whatever, is trying to make you move well. And so if you're going to spend time on this rowing machine, you might as well do it right and learn how to move well. You spent 8 hours learning how to squat. You might as well spend like a few minutes learning how to row. And all that to say is you could just sit down and row really hard and not think about the numbers. But concept 2 is amazing. It gives you so much data here in this monitor that you can use it to become a better rower, which is, in my opinion, going to make you a better mover. So we want to make sure that we understand what it is. So I'm going to bring the camera over and hopefully be able to show what we're looking at. So there we go. Woo! Okay. So it's not that stable, but that's all right. So what we're looking at is the blank screen. I'm going to try and, there we go. So it's, let me make sure I'm playing over here. Okay. So we've got the just row. And if we just click that, okay, what we can see here is 6 lines. You can always change your display here, but I'm going to just show you the most important things. So if you take it to this 4 screens, then we can see the most important numbers. What we want to look at is the big number. That's the split. That's per 500 meters. This is how long it takes you to row 500 meters. So the harder you're rowing, the lower this number will be. The faster you'll move through that distance. So understanding how this number changes is important. That's how much force you're putting in the machine, how much faster you can move through a distance. Obviously, the meters are your distance, and then the S/M is the stroke rate. That's going to tell you how fast you're moving back and forth on the machine, okay? These 2 numbers don't always correlate off of each other. You can row very slow and very hard. You can also row very, very light and crappily and very, very fast. And if you're not seeing that 500 meters, you can change the units, because what we're just talking about is a measure of energy. So we've got watts, calories, and then time. All right, so understanding what you're looking at on this monitor is very helpful. If you look at it in this 6 split, 6 lines, you can see the average here, and that's also super helpful. So if we go back to the menu, the nice thing is you can select different workouts, right? They're right here in your machine. You can do 2,000 meters, lots of things like that. Custom list, there's different workouts you can do. So you don't even need to know how to do anything, right? You can set this up with the already pre-programmed ones, but then you can also set your own workouts in here. But my point is, understand what this data is and how to use it and how it's going to make you a better rower. So I'm going to come back over here, make sure that I am pointed in the right direction. Okay, cool. All right. So let's see. I just want to make sure that this is working. Okay. So know your data. Understand those numbers, how to use them to become a better rower. That's number 5. So to recap, 1, look at the damper. 2, set your feet in the right place. 3, adjust your butt cheeks. 4, order of operations. Legs, body, arms, body, legs. Okay? Use the legs. Use that hip swing. And number 5, know your data. All right? So let's see if I can pull back up those comments because I lost them. And onto this third topic, programming and where to start. So like I said, we are looking for the least amount of conditioning necessary to get to your desired goal, right? So if your desired goal is to be a better lifter, we may need to add some conditioning as you become more of an intermediate athlete. If your goal is weight loss, this is an awesome tool for that, okay? Instead of going on runs and kind of burning all those calories, you can use the rowing machine and you don't end up feeling quite as crappy after a run, right? And then, good. Okay, now I can pull up these comments, I think. So, what I would suggest is that 1 to 2 times a week, whatever, either if you have a coach programming for you or you're programming for yourself, 1 to 2 times a week doing conditioning depending on where you are in your journey, your strength journey. One of those could be a low intensity, steady state. That's going to make you a better rower. It's going to give you a lot of time to perfect the stroke, which honestly is an important thing, right? We all want to move well. It's also just the slower twitch muscles, things like that. So that's one option. We have tons of ways to do that. You can row for distance, you can row for time, you can row for 5 sets of 5 minutes with a little bit of rest in between, things like that. And then the second one I would say would be high intensity intervals, which probably you already do. So most of the time I see people doing like 20 seconds on, 40 seconds off, or 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, things like that. But there's a lot of other ways to do that. You can do 100 meters on, 500 meters off, or 100 meters on, 3 minutes off, or you can do 1 minute on, 2 minutes off. There's a ton of things in here, and all of those things are going to make you a better rower, and it's going to help you understand how to set this machine most effectively for you. The additional level to that programming is, yes, we have your split, your intensity. How hard are you working? But the second thing would be, how fast are you moving back and forth on the machine? And once you can master those two, the intensity and the speed in which you're rowing, so if I show you here, I can row very slow and be producing a lot of effort, right? But I have a ton of time to breathe here, right? And then I can pick up the speed and still row as hard and maybe even get that split down a little bit lower, but it's because I've mastered the ability to maintain my body in the right position at a higher stroke rate. So manipulating the stroke rate and the intensity for different workouts is going to make you a better rower. Now, that involves programming. So where to start? A lot of things that I do is I program for different people online in rowing, whether they are already lifters with me or not. And one thing I've done is I've created a program called Row Ready. It's a 6-week program, and it has a series of workouts, about 24 workouts. It's like a linear progression of rowing, to be honest. It takes you through the beginning drills, teaches you all the fundamentals, and adds kind of an intensity to the workouts as you go. Now, this is built for people that have never rowed before, but even people with experience really enjoy it. And I am considering building a Rowing for Lifters program. So if there's interest, please let me know, which would fit into your strength training program. But this one is actually really adaptable to that. It's 4 workouts a week. I would say do 1 or 2, and it just becomes a much longer program. So anyways, you can find that on my Instagram. And if you have any questions, let me know. But the big thing that I want to leave you with is that you should pay attention to the machine, okay? It's important that you understand how it works and how to be the most effective mover on it. Yes, we can just sit down and get our heart rate up. Sure, you can. You can do that in anything. But what's the point? Like, if you're going to do something, do it right. And if you're here and you care about starting strength, then obviously you care about how you move under a bar. So also care about how you move on the rowing machine. And if you're looking for a tool to use for conditioning, I would highly suggest it. I'm sure your gym has it, and I'm sure that nobody's on it. And while I don't know if you can find one right now, good luck to you if you can. It is also a great tool to have in your house and do on your kind of off days, things like that. So, like I said, I will try and go through this and answer some of the questions. But what I really would like to know is if people are interested in a kind of linear progression of rowing as a conditioning tool that would fit into your rowing program, because that is something I'm very interested in building. I already apply it to a lot of my clients. And the thing that I want you to take away is that please just try to row well. Put a little thought into it, right? Look at the damper, put your feet in the right place, adjust your butt cheeks, and go through that order of operations correctly. And I think you will see a bigger response. You'll like it more, which honestly is kind of a big part of this. Most people hate rowing. And you may actually see your lifts go up. No promises there, no guarantees. But if it's more enjoyable, then you're much more likely to do it. So with all that said, looks like they just posted my Instagram on there, so you can go check it out. If you go into the link in the bio, you can find the Row Ready program and just check out the information on it. You can row too. Tons of resources on rowing. We are like blowing it up right now because what else are we going to do? So if you do have a rowing machine and you're like, now's the time, hey, come check us out. And otherwise, keep lifting if you can. I'm sure we've already put out lots of ways that you can keep lifting if you don't have a barbell. And yeah, row strong. All right. Thanks for joining me, and stay safe, stay home. And yeah, thanks. I'm going to go over there and pause it.